Hello, I'm Rayan from the Compliance People. I'm here to give a brief overview of the changes that are coming to waste exemptions in England. If you currently operate a waste activity under an exemption, you'll need to understand how these changes will affect your organization and, importantly, how to prepare. In this short webinar, I'll give a brief background on the law that regulates the waste exemption regime and explain the reasons for the changes. I'll also fill you in on the different changes to specific waste exemptions and how it may affect your organization. And finally, I'll give some advice on what steps to take next. So to understand the reasons for these changes, we'll have a look at the law that regulates the waste exemptions regime. The waste exemption regime in England is governed by the Environmental Permitting England and Wales Regulations 2016. Also known as the EPR. The EPR allows some low-risk activities to be carried out without an environmental permit. Operators under the scheme can instead carry out their activities under a registration process, and some operators must keep records of their activities to remain compliant under this regime. So there are four main categories of waste exemptions in England. Each exemption provides the specific conditions for different types of waste activities. Operators may be exempted from activities involving the use of waste or U exemptions, activities involving the treatment of waste or T exemptions, activities involving the disposal of waste or D exemptions, and activities involving the storage of waste or S exemptions. So why are these changes coming to this regime? The changes stem from responses to a consultation published in 2018 by DEFRA and the Welsh Government on proposals to tackle crime and poor performance in the waste sector. Following the consultation, DEFRA has published details of the changes to this regime in their supplementary government responses and annexes. One of the changes introduces charges to register waste exemptions. I will go into more details of this later on. A public consultation on these charges will take place from autumn 2023. These changes are expected to come into effect in April 2024. The main changes to the waste exemptions that you need to know are exemptions will either be removed completely, while some will have their conditions changed. There are also some title changes to specific exemptions. Exemptions will also be prohibited from being registered if there is a direct link to an environmental permit. Particularly, SI and S2 exemptions will be prohibited from being registered at sites where there is a direct link to any other exemption. There will also be a requirement to keep general electronic records relating to waste exemption activities. Now, I've mentioned the term direct link. It simply means that these waste exemptions can't be registered if the waste activity is carried out on sites adjacent to a permitted waste operation and is carried out under the control of the same operator, or uses the same staff, equipment, or infrastructure as used in an exempted waste activity. As mentioned, a big change happening is the introduction of charges to the waste exemption registration process. The Environmental Act gives regulators powers to charge for exemption registrations. These charges will help spending on online exemption registration services and act as a barrier to operators registering exemptions unnecessarily. Charges will also help support the delivery of risk-based compliance activities. Any new charges for exemptions will be subject to further consultations by the regulators. Remember, a public consultation on these charges is planned for autumn 2023. So how will these changes affect your business? So there will be a transitional period for each of these waste exemptions after the changes come into effect. This gives operators enough time to adjust. Within these periods, you must make changes to your activities to ensure compliance. Operators will have to obtain an environmental permit change their activities, or stop them completely. Do expect these changes to come into effect from April 2024, but this date may change as based on government estimates. I'll explain the changes in more detail as we go along. As mentioned earlier, some exemptions will be removed, and operators will need to carry out activities under an environmental permit or stop the activities completely. The waste exemptions that will be removed are T8, mechanically treating end-of-life tires, T9, recovering scrap metal, and U16, use of depleted ELV for parts. The transition period for these changes is 3 months. Also mentioned before, some waste exemptions will have their conditions change instead. Let's first have a look at U1, use of waste in construction. The name will change to use of waste to construct and maintain surfaces and barriers. The waste type, quantities, and activities for certain construction activities will also be restricted. The transition time for this change is 12 months. The other exemption to look at is T4, preparatory treatments such as baling, sorting, and shredding. The name will change to preparatory treatments of waste. Storage limits will also be reduced, and conditions for specific waste types will be changed. For example, no more than 500 cubic meters of any individual waste can be stored at any time. The general conditions will be changed to reduce fire risk. The transitional period for these changes is 6 months. Now let's have a look at T6, treating waste woods and waste plant matter by chipping, shredding, cutting, or pulverizing. The name will change to treatment of waste wood and plant matter. Storage limits will be reduced and conditions for specific waste types will be changed. The transition period for this change is also 6 months. Moving on, we now have T12, manually treating waste. Stricter conditions will be introduced, particularly storage, quantity, and pile height requirements. More details can be found in Annex 4 of the associated annexes. This change also has a transition period of 6 months. Let's look at D7, burning waste in the open. The name will change to burning vegetation at the site of production. Quantity limits for storage and burning will also be changed. More details can be found in Annex 5 of the associated annexes. This change has a transition period of 6 months. And now we have S1, store waste in secure containers. This will be renamed and reformed to better reflect the material stored. Storage limits will also be reduced. For example, the total volume of waste stored at any time is reduced from 50 to 15 cubic meters, and the storage limit for most waste will be 3 months. The transition period for this is 12 months. And finally, we have S2, storing waste in a secure place. Like S1, this will be renamed and reformed to better reflect the material stored. Storage limits will also be reduced. For example, the total volume of waste stored at any time is reduced from 8,000 to 5,000 cubic meters, and the storage limit for most waste will be 3 months. The transition period for this is 12 months. So taking all this into consideration, what should operators holding waste exemptions do now? Well, the Environmental Agency recommends operators review their current waste exemptions and evaluate whether they are still relevant. You should also keep a note of when the public consultation on registration charges will take place, which is autumn 2023. It is highly recommended that you have a look at DEFRA's supplementary government responses and annexes. This is available on DEFRA's website. This will give you an in-depth detail on changes to specific waste exemptions. In the meantime, we will keep you updated on everything you need to know about the changes to waste exemptions. If you're still struggling to wrap your head around these changes, our consultants are happy to support you to ensure your organization remains compliant with all environmental permitting requirements. Thank you for watching this, and I hope that this webinar was helpful.